So we are continuing with our sphere painting exercise, and I already have here one finished sphere. If you missed that first video, you can find the link to it in the video description or in the YouTube card. And so we are going to paint another sphere, and it's going to be this one. So this time the light is coming from the right hand side, the shadow is on the left, and this time it's a darker sphere, which a darker shade of gray, and again we have the core shadow over here, and it's broken by just a little bit of reflected light over here, and this time the highlight is very prominent, and yeah, it's very well defined over here. Okay, so let's get started. So here we are going to be painting still on the same page. I still have my outline, a circle drawn here with a compass, and I have my Paynes Gray. I'm still only going to be using one color. I put the larger mixing plate away so it's out of, so it's not going to block anything of what I'm doing, so you can see it. And of course, again, I'm going to lightly alter the background again on this sphere. So with a clean wet brush, I'm going to paint around the circumference of this circle. And it's fine if it overlaps with your initial painting. It's just an exercise anyway, so don't stress over that. Okay, so I'm going to get a little bit of Paynes Gray and touch it into this area. Okay, let that dry. We're going to use a hair dryer. And again, I'm going to wet the surface area with clean water. And I'm already avoiding the highlight, so that paint doesn't accidentally spill into it. Okay, so pick up some Paynes Gray again. So we're going to start with our midtones. Midtones are over here. And spread that color. Could use a little bit more pigment. Again, you can avoid hard edges, hard paint edges, by keeping the paint moving, by keeping your paper wet. Okay, so I've drawn the highlight. I've painted the highlight a little bit bigger than it is on the reference photo, but the reason is so that I can still paint some dark area into here. I just want to be careful with it at first. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach here, because with the first sphere, I didn't wait too long before I started on the next layer of going darker with the next layer. So this time I'm going to really wait until the first layer that I painted on has dried, or I'm going to help it dry with a hair dryer. Okay, that's good enough, and we're going to again start painting a little darker. So I'm going to start building on the core shadow. Pick up more pigment and drop that in here. And again, the curve of your shadow should follow a circle around the highlight. Okay, let's do some blending. Pick up or squeeze some water out of your brush and clean that up. Add some water. Be careful, your reflected light is over here, so you don't want to go too dark in this area. And this time I'm going to put some of that dark shadow here. underneath the ball, close to where it makes contact with the floor. Don't forget about your reflected light. So you can see the reflected light kind of cuts into the core shadow. So if there wasn't any reflection down here coming from the floor, again, this would be a full shadow. And I want to make sure that's a smooth blend from dark going to light. We're going to keep building up your core shadow again. And use some clean water for some blending over here. Squeeze some water out of that and blend underneath. And we're going to dry again using the hairdryer. So that's now dry, and we are going to continue layering Paynes Gray over that until we have the right amount of darkness on our sphere. So the reason I have to dry it is because if I don't dry it, I tend to pull the pigment off of where I already laid it down. So that's why I really want the pigment to settle, so that if I apply a new layer and add more water, it doesn't come, the pigment that is already on the paper doesn't come away with my brush stroke. I hope that makes sense. Keep blending those edges so you don't have hard edges. And more into this shadow here. So on your reference photo, you want to look at the shape that your shadows are making. And blend again. And now I'm going to darken this area around the highlight. So to do that, I will apply some water first. And that highlight is actually very small, so I can paint away a lot of this white area. And grab some pigment. And wet your brush, clean it, and make sure that highlight doesn't look too harsh. Squeeze some water out of that, pick up some of this paint, blend. Squeeze some of the water. Yeah. So I kind of saved it because I did paint into that highlight too much. I made a bit of a mistake, but I think we're still going to be okay. Okay, I need to dry this again. Good. And again, we're going to go around this highlight. More pigment. that's looking good. So I'm going to go way darker over here and underneath here, and then keep blending everything. So this time, because you want to go dark, you want more paint than water on your brush. Watch those edges. Okay, clean your brush. Clean the brush because there's a little too much paint on it. I need to blend this out into the highlight, or into the lighter side of the sphere. So if you are using cheaper paper, you may have trouble layering this many times if you're using cheaper paper, because it may tear your paper after several applications of water on it. Cheaper paper usually tends to tear more easily. So that's one thing you have to be aware of if you are using paper that can't take too much water. Okay, so that's looking good to me. I'm going to try this again. Okay. And another reason why I'm constantly drying the paper is because I want to be able to see how light things will dry out, because wet paper tends to look dark. So if I dry it, I can see better which areas are still too dark or which areas are still too light. I'm finding this exercise really interesting because sometimes you kind of forget the basic techniques, and exercises like this help you realize how you can still improve on your basic skills. So as I'm painting, I'm making decisions based on how I know light works, and I'm also, of course, checking with my reference photo. But you don't want to purely just copy your reference photo. You want to be aware of the actual physical space that this object would occupy and what things like light or shadow would affect its appearance. Yeah, that's looking good. A little bit darker down here. And I think that's pretty much it. Maybe we will go slightly darker down here because the light doesn't really come over on this side. Make sure you blend, of course. So if you're following along, you will be picking up a lot of skills just by painting a sphere. You're learning how to blend properly, how to layer, paint, and in the next exercise we're going to do something in color, so we can also learn how to make decisions where light affects color. Okay, so I think I'm ready to paint the cast shadow. Clean brush, and then I'm not gonna paint the full shadow just because I have something over here that I'm going to paint later. And first wet that area. Then add pigment, add paint. It's too wet. Dry your brush a bit and spread that. And all I'm using is a single brush, a single size of brush, and one color of paint. So just with that you can get some practice in for your watercoloring technique. Again, I'm not painting the full shadow because we are going to be painting something different over here. So this shadow is going to be broken. Just enough to suggest that contact with the floor. And a little bit of the outline, not too much. And that is pretty much it for this one. And we're gonna stop there.